Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5 Facts. Today we're talking about the 1963 Alfred Hitchcock classic, The Birds. This is a film starring Rod Taylor and Tippi Hedren, and it's basically the birdpocalypse. Birdocalypse, however you want to pronounce that. But enough about all that, let's get right to the facts. Fact number 1. Let's talk about the birds on set. The birds on the set had to be meticulously taken care of, so much so that the ASPCA had a representative on site for almost the entire shoot. They wanted to make sure that these birds were not being mistreated at all. Ray Berwick trained hundreds of the birds on set, mostly crows, seagulls, sparrows, and ravens. Like the sparrows are coming out of the fireplace, and just tons of birds all over the place, but those were the four main species that were involved in this film. They got the birds to attack the camera often by hanging meat just below the lens, especially some of the more scavenger types like the ravens. Nets had to be carefully placed around the set so that the birds wouldn't travel to other sets, since most of this was actually filmed on a lot in Hollywood instead of on site. So if they didn't have these nets on almost every single set, you would just have birds all over this warehouse. During one of the more climactic scenes of the movies where Tippi Hedren is up in the bedroom, she actually had these birds wired to her with vinyl, like so that they couldn't get too far away. So if they tried to fly away, they would actually look like they were coming back to attack her. It was not the most comfortable situation, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Fact number 2. Standard blue matte shots wouldn't work for this movie, and it took considerable efforts to composite these birds in. The use of standard blue screen techniques at the time were a little archaic by modern standards, but it was still something that worked very well. You see it whenever people are driving a car and they've got something moving behind them. But because of the way the bird's wings worked, it would create a weird feathering effect, which you've probably seen in 5 Facts, to be honest, where just little particle effects and things. It was just going too fast. So it was determined that Disney had the only method that would work, and they ended up sending a man named Ub Iwerks. I don't know if that's honestly how you pronounce the name. It's a weird one. He was the leading expert at the time in this, and he actually used a sodium vapor process that would allow this to work with sort of a yellowish screen, and it worked much better for getting these birds composited into each shot. It was also important that they had a lot of open sky to work with. That's why they liked this location in Bodega Bay so much, because you had the hills that didn't go up too terribly high, and then you had a lot of open sky to deal with. This allowed them to do that compositing process much easier. Fact number 3. Tippi Hedren took some real injuries from the birds and crew. The lead actress, Tippi Hedren, had a very exhausting shoot with this movie, especially towards the end. One of the first injuries came from filming the infamous phone booth scene. When the so-called safety glass broke, it stabbed her in the cheek and nose. It was not safety glass, it was standard glass. And basically they were having all these birds hit it, and they were doing all this other stuff, and it just collapsed right on her. During the end bedroom scene, she was brutalized for a week. It took a full 7 days of shooting, and she fell into a nervous breakdown once this was done. They actually had to stop production with a lot of her scenes after this point just for a full 7 days so she could rest and get her bearings back. Some of the shots are even not her whenever she's being carried down the stairs, they're her stand-in. On top of actually having a ton of birds and other issues, Alfred Hitchcock was kind of a notorious creep to his leading ladies. There was a lot of blatant sexual harassment going on this set. Hedren actually had this to say about it. "I think he was an extremely sad character," Hedren said in 2012. "We are dealing with the brain here that was an unusual genius and evil and deviant, almost to the point of dangerous, because of the effect that he could have on people that were totally unsuspecting." It actually got to the point where there was a movie made about this based off of her biography. The 2012 film The Girl is based on Hitchcock's obsession with Hedren and how it slowly forced her out of Hollywood. So before the Me Too movement, there was a lot of this sort of stuff going on, even back into the 60s. It was probably honestly like even crazier back then. Fact number 4. One raven in particular hated Rod Taylor. During filming, there was an irritable raven named Archie that despised the main protagonist of this film. Taylor said, "Every morning, if we were on the set together, he'd come over and bite me. I hated him and he hated me." It got so bad on filming days that Taylor asked to be warned if that particular bird was on set. There's 3,200 birds here, and this particular one just had a grudge with him. He said that even on days where Archie wasn't supposed to be on set, he would come and attack Taylor from the rafters. This isn't all that surprising. Corvids, and which is the subclass for ravens and crows are some of the most intelligent birds, as well as being some of the ones that will hold a grudge the longest. They will straight up identify somebody and hold a grudge against a particular person for ages. I'm not sure if Rod actually like just snuffed this bird off at one point, if he hit it, or if the bird just didn't take a liking to him from the start. But it's definitely one angry, pissed off raven. Fact number 5, popcorn facts. This one is less substantiated, but I want to believe it. Rod Taylor claims that the Seagulls were fed a mixture of wheat and whiskey to make them more docile on the set. They were the most aggressive, they were the most likely to cause problems, so if you got them a little bit liquored up, maybe that was the right thing to do. More than 3,200 birds were trained and used in the film. According to Hitchcock, the ravens were the cleverest and the seagulls were the most vicious. The movie features more than 370 effect shots. The final shot is a composite of 32 separately filmed elements combined into one scene. In addition to the standard crows and ravens and everything else they brought to the premiere of this film in London, they also brought 2 flamingos, 50 red cardinals, some starlings, and 6 penguins. I'm not sure why you would bring penguins to this. Maybe there was a research base down in Antarctica, the Thing style, that was just getting pecked to death by penguins. And our final little tidbit is actually about Hitchcock's legendary attention to detail. He wanted this to be absolutely perfect, so he did some detail work, like he had every single citizen in Bodega Bay photographed so that they could match their clothing style for the actors for this. The restaurant scene, the barn scene, and all these were actually filmed on a set far removed from Bodega Bay, but it was an exact recreation of those particular scenes so that the locals would know that it looked right. Also, Hitchcock sent crews out to film seagull behavior, especially at landfills where they were diving, so that they could get all of this right for the puppets and for the actual birds that were on the set. They wanted to make sure that they were being as accurate as possible to the way these birds would behave, even though they got a little more aggressive than normal. I'm not going to lie to you guys and say that this movie is terrifying. I will say that it's rife with tension and there's a lot of menace. But a lot of times terror, like comedy, is all about a time and place. You're looking at 1963, and there are some fantastic movies from this era. But Hitchcock had a way of just ramping up the tension and doing things that hadn't been done as much on film before. So this is a really good one if you want to get back to the horror history roots. It's not going to be the most terrifying thing you've ever watched. In fact, there are times where it's outright silly. But it's also a technical marvel for the time, and it's a lot of fun to check out. So I can still recommend this movie, even if it's not going to leave you terrified. Also, I just want to say that this is the least threatening apocalypse possible. I would mess up so many birds before they could get to me. Like, you better be sending bald eagles after my eyes. Otherwise, they don't have anything on us. Like, I don't care how many crows you send. It's not going to work. Do you have ideas for other apocalypses that would be whiter than the birds? Like, we talked about this movie partially because I mentioned it at the end of Arachnophobia, where they wanted that movie to end like this. What do you think would be the dumbest apocalypse ever? Put it in the comments below. Also, tell me what you thought of the birds. Is this a classic for you, or does it just not quite hold up? Love hearing from you guys. Also, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Check out our Patreon page if you haven't, and check out some of our gaming content. We got a lot of fun stuff on here, and I'd greatly appreciate you guys looking at that. Have a wonderful day, and we will be back with more 5 Facts.